Hi, Lewis. Welcome to the Leaders Lab Turning Points. Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I know you're a big time trader now. In fact, I think you were just saying like you're training a team of salespeople right now, I'm sure, on what you guys do. But I got to listen to some of your backstory, and I'd love for you to share that maybe with our audience. So wherever you want to kind of pick that up, growing up in
Yeah,
England, and yeah, let's get it rolling. I'd love to hear more about you.
sure. I mean, it feels like I've lived many lives in one short life. I'm only 35 at the moment, but yeah, I feel like I've experienced a lot of life and different lives in that time frame. So when I was growing up, I grew up in North London, a place called High Barnet, which is in the UK. And I mean, if you couldn't tell from my accent already, from the UK. And I had I would say, a fairly normal childhood, to be honest, in the sense of both my parents were teachers. They had good, normal jobs. They are lovely, wonderful people. They took me to the local church because that's kind of how you got into the local primary school. Although we weren't a particularly religious household, like we didn't pray or say grace or anything like that, or read the Bible together, nothing like that. So it was very much kind of cultural Christians until I was about 14 or 15 when I kind of got quite heavily involved in the church and really took on that faith and that belief system for myself. And I kind of just went really deep into the world of Christianity and Christian spirituality as well. And when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I was trained as a um, therapist, really, a counselor of sorts within the church context. And I loved it. Absolutely loved helping people. I'd been leading youth groups from the age of 14 and speaking and teaching Bible studies and everything like that from 14. And it felt like a very natural progression to then take it to a different level where I was doing very what felt like meaningful work. And it was meaningful work. And we saw fantastic transformations in people's lives on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level as well. And it was in my early 20s after having done that. I'd been to university, I'd done an undergrad in sociology. Again, people I find fascinating. I
Yeah.
kind of wish I'd done psychology, but I didn't have the grades for that.
Can I ask like, what pulled you into the church at such a young age? Because that I mean that's an age where a lot of people are. You said 14 or 15 when you really kind of dove in, and it sounded like it went from being at least influenced a little bit by your parents to then being self-influenced. Like, no, I want to be here. Like, this is my community. And at 14 or 15, I mean, I was looking for ways to get an adult to like buy me beer. You know what I mean, on the weekend. So what pulled you in?
Yeah, I think from a young age, particularly around about the age of 11, really, although it was when I was 14, 15, I decided to really commit myself to it. I would go on Christian summer camps, which were a great way of my parents getting rid of me for a few weeks in the summer, because obviously they were teachers as well. So they were on
Sure.
holiday, they wanted a bit of time to themselves, which I don't begrudge them. And it was an amazing experience to go to different parts of the UK, do kayaking, canoeing, mountain climbing, all of that sort of fun stuff that you do, but it had a very Christian edge. And through those Christian values that were being taught and Christian experiences and seeing people have what looked like religious experiences and really connecting with and engaging with spirituality, I started to develop a real desire to have that for myself and see what that would look like for me. And if God was real, why couldn't I interact with him? And that then evolved in my mid-teens to doing evangelism on the street, knocking on doors and doing evangelism and sharing the message of the good news of the gospel and wanting to have other people come into this group that we were in because it felt like you were on a mission. It felt like you had purpose. It felt like you were in a battle against the darkness. And that's very all-consuming and very attractive to someone who, A, is naturally wired to want to help people. And B, likes being given a purpose. And I
Yeah.
really enjoyed and benefited from those things. And I've always been quite spiritual, emotional, and the part of Christianity that was being introduced to in my mid-teens was very emotional and spiritual and wanting to have these religious experiences. And so I was pursuing those in my mid-teens.
When you're getting like you're hitting on so many of what it was hitting on, it sounds like so many of the human needs for you, right? Like you were getting, your spiritual cup was getting full, your contribution cup was getting filled, your love and connection through community cup is getting filled, right? Your significance cup is getting filled too, because you're able to help people, not in a negative way, but able to help people and feel good about yourself, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And had was this, did you feel, were you more of a loner before the church? I mean, was that part of what pulled you towards it,
No,
or
it's a good question. Was I a bit of a loner? I don't know if I was a bit of a loner, but I always felt, and even when I was in the church, to be honest, I always felt not part of a group.
okay,
So even within my own family, I would feel like I was on the outside of that familial relationship. And even with my best friends at school, it felt like they were a group and I was kind of external to that. Whereas in the church, I became a bit of a central pin of that group and that youth group at the
right,
time, obviously. And um, I definitely got a lot of significance from it and feeling like, well, being told on a week by week basis, you're going to change the world, you're going to do this, you're
sure,
amazing, you're special. It's quite intoxicating, really,
yeah,
hearing that every single week.
that's really cool. So where does it go from there, as now you become a counselor, or therapist of a sort, right? Where does that
Yeah.
go?
So I actually built a business. We would call it a ministry in the church, but I built a business internationally helping people doing that and loved it. It was incredibly fulfilling and obviously paid me as well, which was quite nice and not bad salary for the age that I was at doing that. And again, significance because people internationally were seeking me out to help them. And I loved that. And then in my early 20s, I started to burn out and the cracks in my own foundation started to show. And these years of being on this journey and this mission to help other people, which was still my heart today, just in a different way, started to unravel a deeper truth that was being covered up by just being so focused on this mission and the significance that I was getting. And so it was when I was in my early 20s and then into my mid 20s, I realized I was having a challenge of identity internally, an identity crisis, really, because my sexuality was starting to become apparent to me. And when I say that to people, they're like, "Well, how did you not know beforehand?" And I just, I didn't.
Right.
The part of the church I was within was very, very Puritan and very, very strict on what you can look at online, what you can drink, what you can smoke. And was actually the rule is just you're not allowed to do any of that. You have to be
Right.
above reproach. You can't have any even whiff of sin or bad behavior. So I was very, very good and stuck to those rules. And so I suppressed so much about who I was naturally that those things didn't start to reveal themselves even to me until I was in my early 20s.
So
And
you
that's when,
really you didn't know till you knew, kind of, right? I
yeah,
mean, maybe
exactly.
it was always there, obviously, but
Yeah.
it just
And
wasn't allowed to come to the surface, really.
exactly. And in hindsight, you look back and think, how did I not know? How was I not aware of it? But the language that you're taught within the community I was part of was very much if you have that feeling, that's the devil trying to tempt you. So it's not you, it's the devil, and you need to
So
hide away from
push it
basically.
down more, like double
Yeah,
down on the repression, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
that's got to
yeah,
be a major identity crisis, because here's this thing that's filled you up now for a decade or 12 years or something, by the time
yeah.
you're starting to question it.
And
And
in
at
your
this,
formative years, very,
yeah.
very formative years. Yeah.
Oh my God. So what did you do? I mean, how did it play out?
Um, Years of difficulty and pain.
Yeah.
And they talk about in the church count the cost of following Jesus. And I basically spent a very, very long time crying myself to sleep. Not every night, that'd be a bit too dramatic, but quite often crying myself to sleep, begging God to change this element of me because I was told it's not what he was happy with. And so I was desperately trying to change it. I would starve myself. I would pray constantly. I would do all these
Oh
things to
man.
try and change it. I'd ask people to pray for me and pray for healing, pray for demons to be cast out of me, all of that kind of fun
Could you
stuff.
talk to anyone else, like your parents, or I mean, was there
No, not
anybody
to my
else in
parents.
your life that knew, or were you just like, no, I got to get rid of this and
Yeah,
move
just a
on?
very select few people
Yeah.
with the hope that they would help me get rid of it,
Wow.
basically. And then I realized it wasn't going anywhere
Right.
after years of this struggle. And I was I just remember being at my parents' house, staying at my parents' house one day, and they were out, and I cried myself to sleep the night before, and I woke up in the morning, and I just thought, if this is wrong to be this way, why am I feeling this way when I've done everything that I could possibly do to not feel this way? Like I have done literally everything I could possibly do to change that element of who I was for years now, and God hasn't seen fit to change it. So it doesn't make sense to me anymore. And it just all stopped making sense. And I was like, okay, if I'm counting the cost, this cost isn't worth it. I don't want to be miserable for the rest of my life. And I was very, very miserable.
Right.
And so I thought, right, if this Jesus thing is true and if God is real and he doesn't like me being attracted to the same gender, I've done everything I can do to change it and he's not. So I'm not going to put myself through misery for the rest of my existence because of that anymore. And so I made the decision that I was going to walk away.
And what age were you when you decided that?
Um, I was when I fully made that decision, I was 25. And then when I was a few months later, when I was 26, is when I told my parents about my sexuality.
How did that go? If you don't mind
Um,
me asking,
I don't
sorry.
mind you asking. It didn't go amazingly.
Yeah.
It wasn't terrible, but this is why I always remind people as well. So my parents are lovely people. They are very accepting. They now love my other half, probably more than me. And they've always had friends from across the spectrum of different walks of life. But they were just very concerned for me and what it meant for me. And also, I remind people that your parents, especially I'm 26 at this point, I'm not a child, I'm an adult. They've had a very particular perception of who I've told them I am for
Right.
26 years of my life.
Right.
So it's a massive shock to their system as well. And you have to give people time to readjust to the new vision or new reality of who you are and what life looks like for you and
Right.
for them with you over the next however long.
Right.
So it didn't go amazingly well. We had some very tough conversations, but after I would say all those tough conversations brought us closer. So we now have a very, very good relationship. Whereas before we didn't have a great relationship. And it's not because of the fact that I was gay, it's because of the fact that I
You were
was gay. I
miserable.
was hiding who I was from
Yeah.
them many, many years
Yeah.
without even realizing it. So now I look back and I said before I felt disconnected from groups of people all the time. It's because I was never living in honesty with myself. So how could I be honest with everybody else? I
Right.
couldn't.
Right. That's so what did you do to replace I mean, the church at that point again was your community, it was your job, it was your significance, it was I mean it was checking lots of boxes. It was unsustainable, but it was checking lots of boxes. Did you know, I mean, obviously you've thought about this for a long time and thought about the break. Did you have a next move in mind or was it let me just break ties and I'll figure it out? Like what happened after that?
Yeah, I think that was a gradual process, and
Yeah.
I because I was so wrestling with my own identity, and I was kind of there was times near the end where I was kind of straddling two worlds, and I didn't know where I really fitted in and where I was going to be. But I'd originally when I did a master's degree in theology, and then in my early 20s the only job I could get was working in retail. So I've been
Okay.
working in retail whilst also then doing this business of counseling and therapy stuff. And it was when I was doing that work that I discovered trading and investing. And so I've been building my own trading pot for at the age of 26 when I came out to my parents for about 18 months to 2 years. And so I kind of had a vision of the future that I could do stuff financially that didn't rely on my counseling and therapy work that could get me out of the retail job that I hated. And I started to teach for the organization that taught me, which was called Rich Dad Education by Robert
Okay.
Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
So I paid them to teach me, and then I was now being asked to teach and speak on their stages because I was A, good in front of people. Surprise, surprise, I've been doing it since I was 14.
Right.
And so I was starting to get significance and meaning elsewhere. So it wasn't a hard cut and then I'll figure it out. It was a I'm trying to figure out who I am, and I now
Yeah.
have these two worlds going on. And so, where do I want to be? What feels more aligned and true to who I actually am?
Right.
And that's when I was like, right, I just need to be true with who I am and stop pretending. And even that, even after coming out at 26, I was still say up until my early 30s, I was still figuring out what actually does this look like for me. So yeah, it's definitely a journey.
Yeah, I mean, you're having to figure out what, yeah, what does the whole rest of your life look like, right? Do
Yeah,
you, yeah, do you get married? Do you like, yeah, what does all that look like? So as you start working for them, and I imagine in addition to like your platform skills and the fact that you like contributing to people, it sounds like you were probably at that point where you sort of like the case study as well. Like you could get up there and go, hey, I've
yeah,
implemented this over the last 2 years, made X amount of money. Yeah.
exactly that. Yeah, yeah.
What kind of success were you having with it, and what were you doing? Was it like day trading, swing trading? Like what kind of stuff was it?
Back then, both.
Yeah.
So I started off as a swing trader, and after 7 months, I was able to leave my job. And so that was kind of like the big case study. It's like, oh, this guy left his job after 7 months.
Right.
I always say to people, it's like, yes, I did. That's completely true. But I was single. I
Yeah.
was not having to pay a mortgage. I didn't have kids to look after.
Right.
So my expenses on a monthly basis weren't very high. So it was easier for me to generate enough income from my trading to be able to leave my job. And I hated it. So I was motivated to get out of
Right.
it. And I always tell people I think I left too early. I do think it's good to increase your trading account with funds you can pull in from other sources of income is a really good way to go. So then when I left my job, I started day trading. So start off as a swing trader, then started day trading alongside my swing trading. Got really good results, but realized I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't ticking the box for me of helping people. Yes, I was making more money, but I've never really been money focused or money orientated, which is very much why when I set up my company that now teaches other people how to trade, I didn't just set up a course and an educational platform. It's a whole community. So we go on holidays together, we have socials together, yeah, amazing, amazing community, which I probably have used to replace the community that I
Of
used to have
course. Yeah.
in the church. So yeah, it's I was very much a good testimonial for the organization that taught me originally. But through that, I developed my own skills, my own processes for trading, and that's what I now teach other people.
When did you start that?
So we set up Star Trading. I say we, it was me.
Yeah.
I always use the royal we. I think it's a very British thing to do. And it's because we are a we now, so the company has grown. When I started it, it was just over 4 years ago, so nearly 5 years. Yeah, so about 4.5 years ago now. Yeah.
So we were in the heart of COVID, like when you
Yeah,
started it.
so I basically launched during COVID. Yeah.
Kind of a good time, right? In a way. I mean, if you could get through the bad part, there was a whole lot of good,
Yeah.
by 2021, right?
Yeah. I think we are an online business, which is why we've got students and mentees all over the world, America, Canada, South America, all over Europe, Africa, Australia, literally every time zone you can think of, we've got students, which is great. And I think when I launched in COVID, which wasn't intentional, it was just accidental, that's when it kind of all happened. But we are an online business, really, and that worked really well for building a base foundation of students because we got loads of testimonials from people who were at home, wanted to do something else, wanted to generate money, had the time because they weren't going out. So it was way easier for them to be focused on the process, which is a really good thing because our process was terrible back then.
Yeah.
Like we've evolved massively since then. I mean, when I think back to how we used to deliver mentorships, we used to do one of our mentorships was just a 1 6 hour block in one day, all online, with a half-hour break in the middle. So 3 hours full on content delivery and practice, half-hour break, another 3 hours full on content delivery and practice. Just insane. Like, I don't think anyone really learned a lot.
Yeah, that's a
And
lot
we
to
used
take
to do
in.
it that. It's a lot, yeah. I mean, we had a load of follow-on support, so it was fine, but we've now broken it up a lot better to actually facilitate really helpful and quick learning as well.
So did you build like a subscription model then? Is that essentially what you built?
No, we don't. Yes and no. So I really did stumble into growing my business, to be honest. So when I originally launched it, I launched a ebook which was designed to be a lead magnet for Rich Dad education. So that was going to be the thing. And people were like, oh, I don't want to go to Rich Dad. Can you just teach me? I was like, well, I don't really have any resources to teach you right now. So I quickly created a course, 12 module course. And I say quickly, I launched the first 4 weeks before I'd finished the others and people were paying me $50 for that. And then I quickly had to finish off the next module so they could go to the next module. So I quickly did that, got that set up, and then they finished the fourth module and they were harassing me to get the third module. I was like, oh my goodness, I need to do this. So I just did that all the way through 12 modules, basically through peer pressure because I didn't want to let people down. Always been a bit of a people pleaser. I'm trying to get rid of that still. And that's what helped me build this foundational course, which people could use and start to become successful. Then we launched off the back of that, like a support group, which became the community. And then off of that, people were asking for more in-depth training. So we then did mentorships off the back of that. So it very much was an organic growth rather than an intentional, right, we're going to have mentorships, they're going to like this, they're going to be this pricing structure, blah, 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 all of that. So yeah, it very much was organic. So we are half subscription model. So once people finish their mentorships, then they can go onto a subscription model for ongoing mentorship or just staying part of the community. So the follow-on stuff is generally subscription, but the upfront learning isn't subscription, it's fee-based.
Have you found some balance in all of this, like work-life balance and all of that? Because it sounds like a very intense run. I mean, on the maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it trading in and of itself, I was day trading and swing trading in 2020, and I wasn't creating courses, and I felt like I was glued to my computer like a lot during that
Yeah.
time, you know?
And this is why I didn't like day trading because I was trapped in front of my charts, which
Yeah,
is why I stopped day trading and just focused on the swing trading. So the style of trading I teach people from a swing perspective only takes 30 minutes a day, and you
right,
can still make 5% to 10% growth every single month on your account. So I had the time to be able to work on business elements and training elements because I didn't have to spend loads of time stuck in front of my charts because it just doesn't work for me. I don't like
right.
it. I find myself making trouble for myself.
Exactly. Start poking
Yeah.
around, doing the after hours thing, like,
Yeah.
oh, what's moving right now, you know? And yeah, that was always a slippery slope for sure. So
Yeah.
before we went on, you said you were in London and then moved out. What prompted the move from being in the city to like moving out into you? Your words were the middle of nowhere. So
Yes, the middle of nowhere. So I live kind of on a section of the UK called the Wash, which is kind of the border of Lincolnshire and Norfolk, and it is in the middle of nowhere. So I went from a two-bed place to, well, two and a half bed, but the half bed is tiny,
sure,
to a seven-bed, 1 acre plot of land in the countryside, and I love it. I really do. But I just found that every time I would leave London and I would come back, the second I would get into London, I would be stressed out. I'd be angry. There'd be too many people around just doing stupid things, just felt like you're always overlooked. People are always watching you wherever you're at. In our house, we could always hear our neighbors, strange things going on with our neighbors. There was no sense of community, especially where I lived in London. Pretty much everybody on my street, every house was a different nation,
right,
which is so lovely in so many ways, but it doesn't tend to create community, or at least it didn't where we were. And we just wanted a bit more of a sense of community. We wanted a bit more space to breathe. We wanted more bedrooms. We love entertaining. And so in our old place, entertaining in the summer was fine because we had a quite a good garden as long as it didn't rain. But in the winter, it was very hard to entertain more than four people.
sure.
So now we can have big old parties, have all of our family over and the whole family stay. And my sister's got like three kids and they're all fine in the house and things like that. So yeah, we wanted to be able to host and look after people and things like that, and we couldn't
That's
do that in
cool.
London.
How far from London?
Driving to my parents who live in North London is only about 2 hours,
Okay,
so it's not horrendous. And then the train from when we live into central London is also 2 hours, so it's not
not
too
bad.
bad. Yeah.
What's your relationship now with the church and with your higher power?
I definitely would say I still hold on to my faith.
Yeah.
So I'm I've been talking about this with one of my friends who's kind of gone through a similar journey as me, and we kind of say we're spiritual from a Christian descent is a way that we like to kind of talk about it. So I haven't thrown my faith out completely, but I think a lot of the dogma and a lot of the religiosity and the rule-based systems that I used to buy into and used to make sense to me just don't make any sense to me anymore. So I still hold connection with God very highly as a value. Um, but I don't really hold on to religious doctrine or you should live this way or that way. It doesn't really make sense to me now.
Yeah, it seems that it seems like there's, to me, two separate things that get blended together. One is a spiritual connection with your higher power. The other is some people that decided what that needs to look like, right?
Yeah,
And somehow that gets blended into one package called name the religion,
yeah,
and yeah, I've never I think it's why I've always had a hard time buying in. I feel like I've got a good spiritual connection, but yeah, the idea that, oh, in this religion, you can't have sex before marriage, and this one you
yeah,
can't drink caffeine, and this one it's like I don't
yeah.
think
It's
God
true.
decided that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like, I really, I don't think he was part of that conversation. I think some people just made up the rules, right? And what they
yeah,
were for everybody.
yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
with you. What about, are you in touch with any of that community anymore? Or because it was so, in your words, I think you said, kind of Puritan, was it just like you were, when you were out, you're out and that's it?
With a lot of them, that's the case. I would say 99% of them, that's the case. There is one or two who I'm still connected to, still friendly with, still see every now and then. Um, but other than that, no, they're all kind of um, disappeared to the ether of a previous life.
Right. How do you feel about that? I mean, is it sort of like, hey, it's their loss, or is it
I go
tough
through
when you go
phases,
through
I
people
think,
that
to
you
be
care
honest.
about and love that can't, I don't know, see things for how they are?
Yeah, I think I go through phases. So I definitely mourned the loss of them a
Yeah.
lot, quite deeply for quite a long time. But you have to, at some point in your life, move on from those
Yeah.
relationships. And that's what I've done. And I mean, they did it automatically. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there was some grieving on their side as well, because there's always two sides to the story, and they have a very particular belief system that they are locked into that I'm no longer locked into. So it will feel like a big loss to them as well. And that is a sadness that I held and a guilt that I held for quite a long time. But the reality is, it is not my responsibility to hold
Right.
that.
Right.
And yeah, I definitely did mourn it for a lot. I don't mourn it in the same way now. I'm not sad about it in the same way now because I'm very happy with who I am and the way my life is. But I do miss those people. There are very deep connections, and
Yeah.
I miss that depth of connection.
But it sounds like it's so black and white in that world, right? So it's like, oh, you're this way. Well, then we're done, right? Like,
Yeah,
not even my choice. That's
yeah,
just the rules, right? And I got to follow them. Um, and I could see where that would be particularly tough when you mentioned earlier, like you're a people pleaser too, right? So it's like, which probably ties into, I don't know, maybe codependency a little bit
yeah.
and stuff like that, right? So yeah, that's got to be really tough. But it's good that it sounds like you've got, for you, not a short period of time because it's been your whole life, but from the time you talked to your parents, which sounds like it was 8 or 9 years ago, to the business that you've created, the man that you've become, owning your own, standing in your own shoes, being true to who you are, and then still finding a way. I heard you on another podcast where you were just like, whatever it is, like you're going to find a way to serve people. And I thought that was really cool. Have you always been that way?
Depends if you ask my primary school teachers or not.
Yeah.
So I don't I used to get weird school reports which feel very alien to me that and they would say things like Lewis doesn't take into account the feelings of others and things like that, which is very baffling to me because all I can ever remember is constantly taking into account how other people would feel. What I would say is my wit can sometimes be fairly sharp-tongued,
Okay.
and I don't necessarily realize it's going to have as an impact on people as it does, and that's always been true. But I have always wanted to help people. Yes, I always have. I hate seeing people struggle. I hate seeing people suffer. I hate seeing injustice. Um, yeah, it's always been in my nature to so, kind of fight for the underdog in a
Yeah.
way, or stand up for people who can't or aren't standing up for themselves. I'm way more likely to stand up and have an argument on behalf of somebody than I am for myself.
Right. No, I
Um,
hear you.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that has always been in my nature. Yeah,
Now, I always like, it's funny. It's like, I would never have ever classified myself as a bully unless I see a bully. You know what I mean? Then I want to, I want to shut that person down for whatever
yeah,
reason. But I feel
yeah,
like it's my job. Like someone's got to do it, right? I feel like
yeah,
I've got to be part of that. But What are some of your goals with the company? I mean, it sounds like it's been growing like crazy. Do you have, sounds like you're probably not someone who's like, well, we're going to do, $4 million by next year and this much in EBITDA. Does it have more to do with expanding your offering, contributing more, adding more people to the community? Like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah, it's I always find it tricky because you're trained as a business person, any business event you go to talk about money.
Yeah,
And there is an element of that because that is one indication of growth and of success. And I
sure.
totally get that. So we've done really well this year. I mean, every year we seem to double for the past 4 years, which is great. But one of the things I'm most proud of is that everyone in my community is a lovely human being. They really are. They all want to see each other succeed. They all do what they can to help each other get that success. And I want to see that community grow. But one of the things and the challenges that I have and I'm trying to figure out is how do I grow a community at scale?
Right.
Because they're almost two separate things, right? You either have scale or you have community. So I'm trying to figure out where I can find that balance. I mean, we have a Christmas party coming up, and we've got about 45 people coming to that in December, and that feels like a lot of people
Yeah.
to all be in one room. And I know it's not masses of people, but it's gonna feel like a wedding, and I'm gonna feel like, oh, I can't talk to every single person or give every single person the time that I want to be able to give them, and that is something that stress me out is the wrong word, but it's a challenge I have because I really like knowing the people in my community and connecting with them and seeing where I can help and where I can support and things like that. So as the business grows, my time per person allocation that I actually have available is lower and lower. So yeah, the big goals are to help more people. I'm on a mission to help 1 million families live with less stress and more fun through financial empowerment and education. And the
Nice.
reason I say empowerment is I'm a big believer in the phrase, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. And that's kind of my ethos behind Star Trading is we're teaching people how to make money for themselves. So we've got some big expansion plans, although we do have mentees and community members all over the world. We haven't made a concerted effort to grow all over the world. We've kind of just accidentally picked people up internationally. So we want to make an intentional effort to move into the States next year. Is a kind of on the vision board, shall we say? And then a couple other places as well, like Dubai. We've got quite a few mentees in Dubai who've done really well, so it kind of makes sense to look at that market too. And continue to grow and start to dominate a bit more in the UK. And the reason I say dominate is because there's some very bad educators and
Yeah.
mentors in the UK, and I would like to knock them off their perch a little bit if I can do.
There's some people, I signed up with a group. I won't name their name, but I did sign up with a group in 2020, and they were just sharks, man. I mean, they were just in fact, their site got taken down for a while. They got taken to court. They somehow got it back up, but under certain like restrictions. It was one of those things where I know it gets tricky in your line of work where we're not financial traders, right? We're education, we're providing financial education so you can act on your own. But I think they went to the point where maybe it went too far. I'm not sure, but it
Yeah,
was, yeah, it was not great. It just reminded me of typical like just boiler room type stuff, make a
yeah,
bunch of money off nothing. And in, whatever it was, probably second, third quarter of 2020, everything started working as soon as the bottom hit. You know what I mean? When the stock market went down to whatever it
yeah,
was, I think the Nasdaq hit 6,000 or something at that time. Of course, everything looked good for a while, right? I
yeah,
mean, until it didn't anymore.
yeah, yeah,
So,
exactly.
what about personally? Do you guys thinking of having kids? Like, what are some of your
Yeah,
plans?
kids has definitely been on the agenda. I think every year that goes past, the more selfish I become, and I really enjoy my life. So I'm like,
Yeah,
"Oh, a kid's gonna kind of take away from that. I don't know,
yeah,
but kids are on the agenda. I feel like I've got a few years I can put it off for still.
yeah.
So yeah, and I don't want to work as hard as I do work currently when I've got kids, and I'm really enjoying working hard at the moment on growing what I'm growing. So yeah, I think kids in the next few years, but no real rush. And then I want to learn French. That's on my agenda. Um, although historically that's never worked. And I'd also like to learn the guitar because now we've got this nice garden space. I want to be able to, when we've got a fire in place and everything like that, be able to sing songs around the fire. I think that'd be lovely.
So the same thing. My son even got me like a Guitars for Dummies book, and I
Oh,
haven't
wow.
cracked it open. It was like two
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I'm like, yeah, that would be really good. I mean, I've been telling myself I'll learn Spanish for like a
Yeah.
while, and then every
Yeah.
time I go to a Spanish speaking country, I'm like, still haven't done it.
Yeah.
So, well, it's been awesome to meet you. Tell me, when people first start working with you, how do they do that? Do they just go to your website? And we'll put this in the show notes, but if you could maybe direct us on where to go and how to do it.
Perfect. Yeah, so they can go to our website and they can go to our events section. A really good place to go is to just one of our complimentary masterclasses. They last 60 minutes. They give an introduction to who we are, what we do, and how we do it, and how it can work for people as well. And they get a few free gifts when they register for that as well, just to kind of give them a really strong foundation and ultimately keep them safe when they're going to be investing in financial markets. So that's probably the best place to go. And if they want to, they can hit me up on Instagram as well.
Cool. And what's the website? We'll put it in the show notes, but if you don't mind saying
So
it.
it's startradingnow.com.
Okay. Startradingnow.com. Perfect. Well, Lewis, it was so good to meet you and get to hear a little bit about your backstory. And thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a real joy.
Yeah, thank you.